Welcome to the Travel Massive podcast.
Hi, this is Kevin O'Shaughnessy from Cityhook and the Dublin Travel Massive team. You know, selling travel technology is tough. And in the Dublin chapter, we've spent a lot of time exploring this in our previous panel discussions. You can find those in our back catalogue wherever you get your podcasts. In 2019, for example, we had Sinead Finn join us at TripAdvisor for a special morning talking about how to sell travel tech, what we called Rainmakers. We decided last November to have a second session on this to see what's changed in the business in the meantime. And when we got together, I certainly learnt a lot. We called the session How to Sell a Big Idea. We were welcomed to an event space in the AWS offices by site lead for travel and big tech here, Dave McAvinue. And in this podcast, we have an edited recording of that meetup back in November 2023. In this first segment, my co-host from Dublin here, Amanda Campbell, also of Sparkling Communications. She speaks with Ultan O'Brien of ViaSat, Riona McHale from Travelport, and Brian Porter from Datalex. Let's drop into that conversation now.
Now I have 3 commercial leaders. I'm going to let them have a conversation and talk, and I am not going to be able to go word in edgewise. So without further ado, I'm going to start with Riona from Travelport.
Hi everybody, I'm Riona McHale. I'm the commercial head for the UK and Ireland with Travelport. I've had numerous roles within the Travelport business. It's an honour to come today and to talk with great minds in the industry about how do we sell big ideas in an ever-evolving, ever-changing industry, I suppose. And that for me is why I'm really excited to chat tonight.
Hi everyone, my name's Brian Porter. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Datalex.
Thank you so much. Ultan?
I'm about 15, maybe 16 years in travel. I currently head up the commercialization of the in-flight entertainment, content and advertising business for ViaSat.
Thank you. What does selling a big idea mean in terms of being different to selling a widget?
I suppose you did say something there that I think we spoke about before, is you're putting people outside their comfort zone. And that's why it's changing, right? That's why you're coming to people with something that's outside of their day-to-day, outside of the norm, not been done before. And what's that doing? They're uncomfortable. And it's easy to say, you want to make them feel comfortable, you want to make them trust you, believe you, but you're not selling a car, right? You're selling something, if it's to an SMB, for example, it's probably their heart and soul, their business. So you've really got to take them on the journey with you. So you've got to build that trust over an engagement of time, right? So you can't just go in and sell, walk out the door and walk away. For me, it's always about the longer term relationship. It's not about come in, sell, walk away. You've got to sell the cyclical relationship of that. So it's got a beginning, a middle, it doesn't have an end, right? Because we're going to keep coming back around to that. And it doesn't have to be this long term that it's ever going to change. It could be a product that is going to change something and be a big game changer, but you've got to sell that relationship. I'll be with you the whole way. I'm going to support you. I'm going to make sure that your teams are able to do it. I'm going to, we're not just going to sell and walk away. And that then comes down to, let's all face it, trust. So you can't just go in and say, believe me, trust me. You've got to show it. You've got to really prove it. And it's for me, that's the most important thing with my teams.
What do you think, Brian? What is it that's intrinsically different about selling a big idea, something that's game-changing, than to sell a product?
I think that for me, Amanda, courageous customers are probably quite hard to find.
Customers, I love it.
I think, you talk about the concept of selling a big idea, but, when it comes to enterprise software, what you're doing is you're essentially selling a future promise. We're typically working on incredibly long sales cycles. You're clearly selling into an organization, not necessarily into an individual. And you're also selling, when I talk about a future promise, you're talking about something that will ultimately deliver value, but it might not be immediately inherent or immediately apparent to everybody within the organization. So when I talk about finding a courageous customer, you're effectively looking for somebody who's prepared to stake their career on your product. Now, in order to do that, in order to find that individual, it is exactly what Rihanna was talking about. It's about building up a long-term relationship based on trust, and that's not something that's easily achieved, and it's not something that's achieved overnight. It takes a team of people, and it takes a team of people to design that journey in terms of how they walk that customer through to that point of confidence in terms of actually deciding, yes, I'm going to take the plunge and move forward with you.
Yeah, I think like success in sales, particularly in the industry, is it's not something you pursue, it's kind of something you attract, right? And a lot of people, their mindset is, I must get out and get that sale and close that deal. It's not really, in my view, my approach has always been to articulate a way in something that's in a very clear way. Clever is good, but clear is better in articulating what the value is to them that you bring in terms of your promise. It's a small industry, really. Like I know in terms of financial, it's massive, but actually you can fit a lot of the key players in a room and you can find them twice or three times a year in that same room. And it's, the barriers to entry, sometimes protect you when you break through and you get an initial customer. They protect you, but as much as it's a virtuous circle, it's also a vicious circle in the sense that you've got to execute and deliver on those. So you're only as good as your last broadcast in many ways, right? So selling a big idea for me is really the early stage of the sales process, really about targeting the right airline customer or travel customer, identifying how much they match with what it is you're selling, right? What's important to them, what you can easily defend in terms of that's unique or different, or something that you have a unique viewpoint on and a unique product that delivers some value to them on, and that's easy to defend against their existing suppliers. I think that's really key for me is to try and find, obviously there's a lot of Goldilocks out there that are looking for different solutions, but trying to find a good marriage quickly is really important for me because you can spend a lot of time out engaging with airlines and there isn't that match, and a lot of the research you do early enables you to find that right customer. And even doing a deal with the wrong customer is really, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's the worst situation to be in. So not doing a deal is sometimes better than doing the wrong deal, okay? So it's about that match. I think in researching, it's a bit like a medical exam. You kind of poke at somebody in terms of understanding where are the pain points, and you continue to poke that until you identify where is those opportunities and is there a match in terms of what you deliver in terms of value. I think that's key to that initial understanding how to sell the message effectively.
I noticed Riona was nodding there. Did some of that resonate?
Yeah, like massively, because we sell, like in my existing role within Travelport, we sell a product, right? But how you use and work with that product is different across all of my portfolio of business. And I work with existing business at the moment. There is new business out there. We go after a lot of share, but it's not one size fits all. You can't go, okay, this is how I'm going to sell it. And you're going, but it's not going to work because they don't do half of what you're trying to sell them. So, but I can tell them how they sell a complete, very diverse airfare to India and Pakistan. I'm going, but none of their business is to India and Pakistan. So why are you showing them that? You've got to make sure you understand who you're talking to, what do they do, and make sure that how you're selling it to them is relating to them, that they're sitting there going, okay, no, this will actually work for me. Because if you're trying to show them something that they don't do or don't want to do, or you're trying to tell them they should do it, you're going to cut your nose off before you've even started. And understanding that cultural diversity, that there are nuances, and all of your customers, whether they're new or existing, have differences and they're changing. Don't presume that what you talk to them about in January is going to be the same in March, April, May. You do quarterly business reviews. Great. Don't make any assumptions. Make sure that you're asking all the right questions and doing that discovery early on, because that's where you're going to succeed if you do all of that discovery. For me, it's so important.
So know your customer, do the research, don't assume.
It's the hard yards, that's the hard
you have to put on the effort, because these deals are big. They may be long sales cycles, they may be high barrier to entry, but when you land the deal, it's worth it. It makes your year, or at least it makes your quarter. Yeah,
we used to say, like, if you know one airline, then one airline, So, like, it's, there's an element of you've got to get under the hood and really understand what's the culture, what do the pink sheets say, what's the CEO talking about, what's in the board of management, you know, what is going on, what's topical. And like you said, you know, from one quarter to another, yes, I would say like travel has gone through 2 or 3 loops in the last 5 to 6 years where, you know, maybe what your competitors is selling or the messaging that they have is its own news, it's out of date, it's not relevant, and you know you've got to dial into those opportunities. So that's it. You know, it's been topical.
There's quite a lot of effort. I mean, obviously the rewards are there, but you know you have to put in the legwork. But now we talk about how small the industry is, yes, but I mean we still sell into maybe top 100. It's still 100 big travel companies that you have to have on your radar at once. Brian, is there any way that you can approach it in sort of a methodical way or some sort of framework behind it that makes it easy? Or how do you think about it when you're approaching that?
I think that's something that we definitely do. So, look, I think whatever you're selling, it'll always have multiple points of differentiation. And you should, if you've only got sort of a single point of differentiation, you need to go and deconstruct your product. And I think a lot of building your addressable market is about understanding your product and also understanding what those kind of key buying triggers are. And really sort of what makes one airline more suitable for your product than another airline. You know, so when we take a look at our product, for example, we don't just have one point of differentiation. You know, we know how we stack up against the competition, but we also know how we differentiate our product commercially. We also know how we differentiate our product from a brand perspective, you know, and who we would typically target with that. We also know that within our product, we've got points of differentiation that would reach into different parts of an airline. So typically, we would go after a commercial role, but we might have something that's more suitable for the CFO. So we take a look at also what the overall architecture within an airline is, and also what the partnership ecosystem is within that airline. So all of these become points of differentiation that will ultimately play back to a weighting in terms of how suitable that airline is as a customer. You know, so we take a look at the total addressable market, you know, much like every other sales division, you know, we would, you know, reduce that to a serviceable addressable market and then a serviceable obtainable market. But in doing so, you know, we would effectively take a look at how those key differentiators suit certain airlines. And then we would also take a look at where in the buying cycle those individual airlines are. And that would pretty much give us a target list that we would then take a look at, well, what do I have from a budget perspective as a chief revenue officer? How big is my sales team? How do I take a look at the geographic distribution and use that as the basis for a go-to-market strategy? So that's typically, you know, how we would take a look at that. But, you know, I've been in organizations where we've tried to turn selling into a science, you know, and I've been indoctrinated into Miller Hyman and, you know, I've had gold sheets and green sheets and, you know, but ultimately I think there's, I was one of those with you, but ultimately I think that there's a level of instinct that comes into this, right? And I think that you used a key word, which was relate, you know, and how you effectively relate back to the customer. So, you know, once you've actually identified a target list, it's about building that relationship. And it's really about listening to that customer. And when I was talking earlier about a courageous customer, understanding a courageous customer is understanding what are the purchase drivers for that individual, and are you talking the same language, and are you positioning your product back to the customer, utilizing that language, and are you putting the keys back in the customer's hand in terms of how they can effectively sell your product back into their organization. And that for me is really what it's about.
So it's about enabling your champion really and helping your champion then do some of that legwork. Ultan, you said something really interesting. You said something about, you know, some customers really aren't a good fit and that you kind of like, it's the deal that you probably don't want to sign. How do you know that? Like, how do you know that maybe this is not going to work?
In Boxever, it was really clear. Like, if somebody was changing their PSS or, you know, their core systems, right? Good luck. You know, like, do not go near them for 12 months because you are wasting your time, right? So it depends on, it's more to do with stability, that they know exactly what they're doing. Like there are airlines who have very clear vision about what they're doing and how to execute it. You can identify them around the world, like they are the top tier guys. They know exactly what their mission is. They have a mantra that's repeated across the business, and everybody focuses around those. Then there are a bunch of airlines that, honestly, they're constantly changing. And it's there's a movement in terms of the leadership, the strategy, the mission, the business model, and so on. And, those are challenging because they're not stable in terms of really understanding how your product fits and delivers value immediately to them. Yeah. So that's what I would say in relation to that. I agree with the relationship side. I mean, I think every first meeting I go to with any airline, the goal for me is always, do they like us and do they trust us? And do they like us as in, have they listened to what, we've said? Does their nonverbal communication tell us that they're interested and they're asking the right poignant questions? And do they trust us? Are we getting to a level of detail technically and perhaps commercially where they understand how we operate and maybe where there is a good fit? I think when I go to market, there's always four guys in any organization we're after, and that is like on the commercial side, it's somebody who's strategic commercially, looking at a 5-year overview of the business, where they're trying to go to and how we fit. And then there's the guy day to day who's running the business and trying to understand, are you going to be a pain for me or are you going to solve my problems day to day? On the other side, there's an equivalent strategic technical person who's looking at architecture, who's looking at the ecosystem, who's looking at partnerships. And they're really saying, when we grow up in 5 years' time, technically, this is what we want, and is this part of the solution that we would like? And then there's the other guy day to day who's always kind of saying, am I going to be putting sticky plasters on any of these systems? Will they integrate well? Are the tools in place? Do they fit well? Can we see where they've already integrated in similar partnerships? Can we trust that? So those are the four. And there's different messaging, I think, for each of those individuals at different parts during that kind of sales journey.
Yeah, and I think if I may just add on to that we traditionally, so I'm the one who goes in and meets with those four people on my team. And my senior account managers will be there. But we realised after I was in this current role, after about a year, I was going, well, why is it still not working? These guys like me, like us, like what we're doing. So all what you just said works. Still something's missing. And it was the layer beneath. It's the winning the hearts. So I'm selling a slightly different product. I'm selling something that teams have to actually use. They didn't want us. They hated us. They were like, oh God, no, that's a lot of change. Right? Absolutely not. I like my job. It's very easy. I push all these buttons within. And we're going, okay, that's the piece we're missing. We got to win the hearts and minds down here. That it's really important. So then we're like, right, let's get in under those sheets and let's get in and win those hearts and minds first. Ain't going to work if you don't.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think with enterprise software, you're selling into an organization. You're always going to have multiple stakeholders. And something that I think is quite easy for any sales team to do is to answer the question at a general level, what problem am I solving for, right? But the immediate tendency is to do that at the org level. So you kind of take a look at a Ryanair, for example, or an EasyJet, or whatever the airline is, and you're saying, what am I solving for the airline? Yeah. But you take that one level lower and you start taking a look at the individuals that you're talking to and the key individuals that you're selling into. And what am I solving for? What problem am I solving for that person doing that job? And understanding that is key.
There was two things we did in Retail in Motion, which was quite interesting. One was that we would bring our development team for the core product on a number of flights as they joined the team, right? So they would witness firsthand what the problem was, what the crew were actually doing at the front, the touch point with the customer. And we would schedule like a W patterns, for flights, so that we would travel all around the place but end up after the full day on various different crews, various different aircraft, but eventually they'd get a full view. So bringing them to the front was really critical in terms of them understanding from a product perspective what the problem was they were solving. The second thing, you absolutely hearts and minds, which was, we used to do coffee mornings in the crew area, right? Giving away free coffee and basically kind of doing this is what we're looking at. What do you think of it? What would you do better? What's missing from it? Where's the inputs that you would tell us that would improve the product before it got out there, right? So you were kind of getting them to buy in early in a very soft sell way.
Question is, without mentioning the C word or the P word, what's different now in 2023 in terms of your customers' big concerns, whether they're an airline or an agency, versus 2019? What are the big things that have changed? What are the big challenges that they're facing?
Good question, Brian. Have you noticed change?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think there's definitely been a change in expectation in terms of time to value. We are in enterprise software. You typically have long lead cycles, but you also typically have long delivery cycles because you're basically implementing enterprise change. So, previously we had a situation where, somebody who would be, or a customer would potentially be satisfied, waiting 6 months to a year for a solution to be implemented. That expectation in terms of time to value has become much shorter. So that's a challenge and an opportunity for a lot of us. I think the other thing with it is what we experienced during COVID was a lot of airlines had commitments to enterprise software vendors that didn't cater for something like COVID. So there were a lot of very difficult questions between airlines and vendors, or difficult conversations between airlines and vendors during that. So how airlines are contracting for enterprise software solutions is very different. So those are probably the two key ones that I would say. The other one that might not be as relevant for other tech vendors in the room is we are also seeing an industry that is deeply entrenched in legacy technology. And we're on the cusp of some pretty fundamental changes in terms of that technology set. So at least for Datalex, we've got airlines who are taking a look at new generation offer and order management capabilities. So there's now an expectation of future-proofing, when airlines are buying. So they'll take a look at your extant products, but they are putting a lot more scrutiny in terms of where you're going and the investment case that you've sold internally for getting there.
Actually, I heard someone agree. Did I? So the question was, we're seeing at the moment after the COVID and the pandemic, a change in airline contracting. So basically airlines are hesitant to sign the 5-year, the 9-year, the 10-year contracts. That they're looking for much shorter term commercial relationships, at least on paper. Is there anything that we can do as senior commercial professionals to can actually counteract that in some way and encourage longer relationships, get back to the old days?
Do we want to?
So so I don't know from ViaSat's perspective, and I think certainly from a commercial standpoint in the companies that I've worked for, we tended to think about things in a platform sense, right? So there was a product view, and there was very tight elements around what you could or couldn't get in that product, right? So what you get, and you don't get upset to a point, right? Obviously customizable to the airline, but very, very tight on the platform view, okay? Yeah. Quite flexible on the commercial model.
Yeah.
So we probably have 8 different commercial models that we operate across all the airlines that we work with, right? Some are wholesale, some are retail, some are, they range in different ways. So I think we try to ensure that from a technology perspective, we have somewhat of a standardization to a point, although trying to make it as customizable as possible, and it's expansive as possible. What we've built is an infrastructure for connectivity, and what we're building is a whole bunch of modules that sit on top of that connectivity that are enabled by connectivity, right? The ad business is a brand new business. It's only about 18 months old, but like it is kind of, what it's doing is it's enabling a third party to pay to get access to audiences on board, so that the airline doesn't have to subsidize the passenger's ability to get internet, and the passenger doesn't have to. So it's an engagement platform. It's a completely different way of doing what anyone has done before, but we're very standardized on the product and the commercialization piece in terms of the CapEx or the OpEx or the revenue share are interchangeable. I think it's yours.
Look, I think we'll always find ways to be more creative with the commercial models, but I think that there was something important that you touched on there as well. I think historically, a lot of us have been all things to all people, and that means that a lot of the value of what we've sold has been optionality. But with that optionality comes complexity and an incredibly long lead time to value. So, through what you were saying, Ultan, about standardization, and more of a product and a platform mindset in terms of, what you can get in front of a customer, means that you've got shorter time to value, and you've got those earlier proof points in terms of how you can actually prove and start entrenching value with the customer. It also starts providing you with an option in terms of the model of providing a very simple proof point as your first phase of value delivery to a customer, and actually build phases of value delivery that might be a continuous upsell or just an ongoing value delivery model that does naturally extend the term of the contract and naturally locks your customer in to a value cycle. But it's a more creative way of getting there.
Yeah, I've always had these kind of trial, everybody goes, give us a trial, and it seems to be just a standard ask in the industry, and our view has always been kind of, unless there's a very clear success criteria and there's a clear link to a commercial contract, it's not a good exchange of value between the parties, right? So, but you're right, like getting something in, having that land and expand piece that you can get to value quickly does enable you to, widen the door and sell the other services that you've got,
So a plan to unlocking value as opposed to a contract to lock in value. What do you think, Riona? Is any of that?
Well, I'm a slightly different angle to the guys because I'm mostly in a share position anyway. So there's me and my lovely competitors all in the door at the same time. So to answer your question, Mark, what are my customers being travel agencies essentially? Instead of selling commitment over term, so 5 years, 6 years, I want them to commit to share because their biggest fear now is volume, for example. So, they can't deliver volume. They're afraid, of committing volume. So I said, well, 10% of nothing is still nothing. So why don't you give me 10% of your business? And then after 6 months, you give me 20%. So again, it's more about remodeling that commercial. But we're an archaic industry and everyone was like, well, you can't ask for that. We have to do a 5-year deal. And I'm going, well, they're going to walk away. They're terrified of that now. So let's change how we did the commercials. Let's rethink that. And we're giving ourselves security. And essentially, we know that most of my clients anyway, they're just growing and growing. So by doing share, and that's just one example, but it's giving my side of the business security that, well, we've got something locked in, but the 5-year deals, they're just gone. It's just not going to happen. But do we want to do 5-year deals? Everything is changing. So I don't really want to be locked into rubbish commercial deal in 2 years' time because everything's changed.
Works both ways.
Exactly. So for me, I'd rather short-term strategic deals, land that value, land and prove that point, and continue those strategic deals. And it's not game-changing, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely providing your customer with a little bit more security, comfort. They're going, okay, you're not pushing me down this 5-year deal, but you're going to land the value. You're going to prove your point. You're going to promise or deliver what you promised. And then you can just continue that over time.
Yeah.
Do I want to be sitting there with a crap commercial in 2 years' time and sitting looking at it for another 3 years? Not really.
Exactly. As someone in product would like to know how you engage with product. Basically, how do we take the goodness from what you know in the market, something that's scalable, that's going to be of long-term value from a product development perspective? How do you take that back into the product organization as opposed to just maybe the squeakiest customer wheel? Does that make sense, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, we've got active listening into the market in multiple ways, right? So, we belong to industry bodies. So, through, the likes of IATA, we're constantly engaging with subject matter experts within IATA, within airlines themselves, and we're listening to what the market's looking for. We participate in a lot of industry events, and that gives us a lot of insight into where the industry's going and where the demand lies. We talk to a lot of our customers as well, and our product people are the ones that are actually having those conversations. So we actually make sure that our product leaders are actually in market. In terms of our own customer base, what we do is every single time that we get an individual requirement for a customer, we don't just assume that it's something custom that's just specific to that customer. We take that into our product team and we evaluate it. We understand the ask and say, well, is this something that we can see value from across the customer base? We may well engage with our customer base to get that level of insight. And then we'll make a decision in terms of whether this is something that becomes part of our product roadmap evolution or becomes a bespoke piece of work for that individual customer. So there are multiple ways that we're effectively, listening to the market and our own customers in terms of doing that. One of the other things that we do, and we've been doing a lot more, is getting our customers to interact with each other.
Yes.
And for me, that's been very exciting to see play out. One of the things that we realize as well is that within our organization, our best salesperson is a satisfied customer. Yeah.
And probably the second best salesperson is a very knowledgeable and evangelist product person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, what do you think, Ultan? Anything to add there in terms of how do we involve product in that sales equation?
So again, my approach has always been to get product into the commercial discussion. So when we do commercial discussions twice a week, we're doing updates at an account level, the technical account manager, the head of product, those people are in that meeting, okay? There may be discussions on, the deal funnel and what we're going through in terms of the engagement and what are the blockers and what are, what's required to do it. But those product people are in that meeting, okay? Virtually maybe, with their video off and maybe feeding the dog. I don't know, but they're in the meeting, right? The second thing is that we tend to bring product. Certainly, I do, into opportunities where there's specific requirements. We tend to bring product people into those meetings so that it's not hearsay or it's from the horse's mouth. You're getting a direct view on what it is, what it means, and why. Why would you do such a thing directly from the airline? So, and again, the product lifecycle piece within the business is always looking at: is this a fringe case? Is this something we want to build into the platform? Does it become part of our customizable piece, or is it an outlier that we would prefer not to do? So that decisioning is always there.
So I think that probably leads me into another thought. So I am in marketing. I do a bit of product marketing as well. And I've also done this for a very, very long time. So I've met a lot of commercial people in my time. And I'm always surprised about how many are what I would call a lone wolf. So that is a commercial person who just goes it alone. And I don't know if that's a foible of maybe the people I've met and the organizations that I've been in, but to what extent is selling a big idea something that you have to do alone, or to what extent is it something that is really much a team effort?
For me, it's always going to be a team effort. It goes back to what you guys were just discussing about bringing product people in. You can't sell a big idea alone because it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Oh, trust me, believe me. they're going, maybe, okay. But if you bring your product people in and you bring your customer success management team, like I have account managers and CSMs side by side, they go in together. They bring in the training people, they bring in the customer service people, they bring in the call center teams, they bring in everybody to sell the whole product as an entirety to show you what you're getting. They're not just going in, doing a demo and walking away. Because if you're trying to sell something big, you've got to show what's backing it. We're here with you. It's not just me selling it to you. That's just where we're at now. And I think the days of the lone wolf going in with the briefcase and cracking it open and doing the demo.
The shock and awe,
For me,
you can whip out your credit card.
It is no more. You've got to sell the whole thing because it's a big idea, so you got to show what's backing it.
I do find that role changes throughout the funnel, right? I think for any salesperson, I think that the one kind of key characteristic you probably look for is a certain level of resilience, right? And I think that, there is that piece, especially at the early stage of the funnel, where you're trying to build those relationships, you're trying to get those calls returned, you're trying to find that way in to actually have that creative conversation that effectively starts the sale, right? And I think that is quite a lonely pursuit, and I think that's where we would probably typically associate that lone wolf, because it is a hunter role, and it is largely quite lonely, and you need to be quite resilient, and you need to be able to wake up and actually draw on that energy every day to bring your all into that role. But there is a point at which it switches within the funnel, right? Where you actually start to get a bit of momentum and you start to get that level of engagement with the customer. And then I think the role completely changes from being that lone wolf to being a leader of the pack. And it is about now taking and leading the organization through a sale. Because for any enterprise sale, you're never going to achieve it yourself. You're always going to need to bring in those subject matter expertise, people who are really going to sell it from a product perspective. You're going to need to bring your legal people in from a contracting perspective. And you're always going to have that one ringleader that is constantly bringing that energy and leading the organization through that sale. So I would say that's it. That lone wolf is what you start out as. But then the minute that you start to gain momentum with the opportunity, you turn to leader of the pack.
Yeah, and I suppose I probably should have. We're saying the same thing, I suppose, because where I'm at now with my teams is that the hunters have done that.
Yeah.
Right? So then they've handed over to the farmers, and I look after the farmers, and they're selling okay, so now that you've signed on the dotted line for 10% for 2 years, now we got to sell the big idea. So that's when the farming and the team comes in.
Two sides of the same journey. Two points on the same journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so 100% I will echo everything Brian said. No,
Is
absolutely
it lonely,
no doubt.
Ultan?
No, but
Is it lonely out there?
So it is 100%. But I do think that you have to scale a sales organization. If you have to go, you have to scale it. So it needs to work not just across the biz dev side, but also as you get into a mature opportunity. It's about bringing in the subject matter experts and really refining that holistic approach to what the solution is. And you drill down to the detail of those next level questions and you need the answers there. Yeah. I think it's really, really important, though, that there is a mantra that's across the organization from a sales perspective, whether you're a subject matter expert or a hunter, that you're all very much aligned towards that same focused view of the organization, of the product, of what you deliver, how you deliver it, and so on. And it's very difficult to ensure that everybody is completely aligned on that, because obviously your product changes from time to time. There's new updates, there's new approaches that you take. You're always adding things. So ensuring, when you look at Ryanair, part of their success in the business is being able to make a significant change in their business on Monday, and by Thursday, everyone across the organization chants it as a mantra, right? So that's what I'm really saying is, the basis of that success is ensuring that everybody who's customer facing and engaged in that process knows exactly what the mantra is.
Yeah. So for me in marketing, business development, I get it. I'm out in the market with you guys as well. I'm at the trade shows and I'm talking to folks. I'm building relationships, blah, blah, blah. But then for me, it goes a bit dark and it kind of goes into this real sort of bottom of the funnel account stuff that I don't really know what goes on down there. And then one day someone emerges and either goes, yay, we won the deal, or they emerge and just go, don't talk to me. I can't. So what happens? What happens when you close? What goes on? Tell me about what happens in the black box. Brian.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think for me, it's the key in terms of closing is constantly keeping the pressure on and constantly, pushing towards close. You never take a break from that step. But I think that within that as well, it's also about designing that process, and I think that this is where the sales lead effectively becomes a type of project manager.
Yeah.
So, for us, there are kind of different steps in closing. So the first point might be agreement on scope definition. The second one might be closing out negotiation on commercials. And the third one would be contracting for signature. So each of those individual processes need to be designed, and you need to basically have a co-sponsor on the customer's side that you co-design that with, that you agree that with, and then you follow that through as a process. I mean, that for me is, absolutely key in terms of achieving that.
Yeah. Structure.
Yeah.
Riona, any secrets?
So for me, sometimes it's the complete opposite. So the structure just goes out the window because inevitably a competitor comes in. And when you're in that black box, you come back, and my team come back, and they're like, we got it. They're going to sign.
Oh.
And
I'm excited for you while you're telling the story. Yeah.
And then they call me the next day, and they're like, they've come in. They're offering X amount more. And I'm kind of going, what? You're joking me. So it comes down to, right, all hands on deck. What have we got to do? Do we got to bring in the product team? Do we got to bring in the CSMs? Do we got to bring in the commercial guys? Do we got to go back to finance? We're not going to, throw all of our commercials out the window here. We've got pride and we have value in what we do. But it comes down to, so you absolutely cannot walk away and take your finger off the pulse until there's a signature on that piece of paper. For me, that is the most important thing. Never take anything for granted because your competitors are always, always, always going to be there. So never make assumptions. Always have an extra little something in your back pocket, because we ain't going back to finance, we ain't going back to the CFO to go, can we have more, please? You've kept that little few dollars in your back pocket. Always have that. And hopefully you never need them. Yeah. When you're down in that detail, always have that extra few quid in your back pocket.
Like I would say, anybody who comes to me, I'm like, where are we with that opportunity? There's always a quick assessment on, have we validated that we're selling the right product in terms of the fit? And have we validated that from the customer side? Are we ticking that box? Are we ensuring that there is no mistake in relation to what we're selling and what they're getting, right? Do we understand what's going on with the customer at that moment in time in terms of the conversations at their board level, the conversations within the organization, anything that's happening at that moment in time that is in any way interfering with our progress. Knowing the competition and understanding what, even if you have a conversation with somebody, you can tell whether the competitor is in their ear or whether the questions that they're asking. So
You're hearing it,
really understanding what is the situation with the competitor, and are you effectively managing, those opposing questions or those challenging questions in relation to that competitive tension. And the fourth is be diligent. So that's that diligence to continue to be ever present in relation to that sales opportunity. And that can be months after the darkness appears, because you don't know. Things may be moving, changing. There may be issues with the existing vendor that you don't have full visibility of. But as long as you're omnipresent and you're checking in all the time and you're trying to get to that, and I would say be confident and ask for the sale. A lot of people don't ask for the sale, straightforward. They kind of wait, I'll wait for you to come back to me. No, are we done here? Have we completed the task? Yes. Are we shaking hands on this, Exactly. And when it comes to price, in my view, there's always a horse trade at the end of every deal, right? There's a sliding, metric in terms of terms and, conditions and price that moves depending on where you really want to get to, So I think that flexibility towards the end of a sale needs to be there, but it's clarity from the team when you're walking in there exactly what that is, and the rules associated with where that point is are clear.
Okay, but I do admire all of my sales friends. Just what I've learned today is that complexity that you have to deal with, that you have to be different people for different people and at different times and in different places. You have to be a chameleon. I mean, that's amazing. But last question, if you're hiring your successor, what are the 3 things that you would look out for? And then we'll wrap it up. Ultan? If you were hiring not you, but the person to replace you, what are the 3 things that you would look for?
So the chameleon, it's funny you say the chameleon, because I'd say, going to different types of airlines, I tend to change my dress, right? In terms of, if it's tier 1 carrier, I'll wear, a suit, tin of fruit, whatever. If it's a US centric American, I tend to wear khakis and blue shirt and a navy blazer, and go a little bit more preppy. And if I'm going to a low cost carrier, I wear jeans and a jacket, maybe something smart. So you adjust because you're basically mirroring somewhat the culture, right? So what you want is in somebody in sales who is passionate about solving somebody's problems, right? Because that is the driver, that's the resilience piece in sales. That the success comes obviously from achieving the sale and getting the rewards of that. But it's not about the money, it's about the process of identifying how you solve an airline's problems and having the understanding to know that you've got a product that can fit, that can help, that can do that. And that's essentially what you're trying to convince them, that you've got a problem, you've got a solution that solves their problem.
And then that conviction in yourself.
Yeah, that they want to solve problems and they want to be successful at it, right? It's really important that they understand relationships with people and how, that they're self-aware, so that they're conscious of the verbal and non-verbal stuff going around. Because I think that's probably the biggest discipline in business development and sales, is understanding what's not said in the room. It's really, really important. And, just that diligence, just that, the ability to go do the research and continue, that resilience to continue on when most people would have given up. That's kind of the behavior traits that you're looking for.
Yeah. Brilliant. Brian.
Look, I think I would echo a lot of what Ultan said. I think for me, in terms of looking for the right person, I would look for somebody who is capable of active listening. I think quite often you will find people in meetings who are able to speak well, but don't necessarily follow the cues that they're actually getting from the customer. I think that on top of that you are looking for a certain amount of relentlessness, and I think that you can classify that as passion, you can classify that as energy, but you want an individual who's not going to tire through a sale. Somebody that can actually dig quite deep in terms of finding that ongoing ethic just to continue. And I think that Ultan absolutely nailed it with a passion for problem solving. I think that that's ultimately the business that we're in.
Love it. Riona, lucky last.
So the question you asked was if we were hiring our successor.
Yes.
So for me, stepping out of my role, someone who's going to step into it, this person needs to respect team diversity and sales teams and account management teams who are diverse and bring different things to the table, because you can't have an army of the same people because I don't have 50 of the same customers. So when I'm aligning team to portfolio, I go, okay, well, he'd be good there, she'd be good there. Why? Because different reasons. So my successor would have to appreciate and respect diversity and understand their own gaps or own knowledge. For me, I have to respect where my gaps are and learn from my team, and then I can come in, I can do all the lunches in the world, go out for dinners, all you want. But at the end of the day, I need the teams to be motivated to go out and do that. So I have to respect that diversity and make sure that I understand where that diversity fits with a portfolio of customers. If I was looking for an amazing account manager / salesperson tomorrow, thick skin. You asked me when we caught up last week, like, what would I tell somebody, if they didn't win a deal? Suck it up, move on. Let's just keep going. Like, there's plenty of fish in the sea. There's plenty of ways to make money here. Let's just suck it up, learn from it, but move on. So thick skin for me is very, very important. Sorry if that comes across as harsh.
Not at all.
It's
Jeepers,
just
it's a
the
hard
way
road.
we have to be.
Yeah.
Excellent answer on both counts. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining this very special.
On the night, we also had a conversation with Dave McAvinue from AWS here in Ireland about his own path, starting companies, selling big tech, and what AWS and Irish travel tech means to him. Here's Dublin Travel Massive and Travelport's Mark Lenihan having a chat with David.
Can you maybe, just for the audience, give us a little bit of an introduction, a background on yourself?
So after college, I set up a digital agency specializing on the tech sector. Then we had an idea that we should do a startup in the middle of one of the worst recessions. This is like 2008. So we went through all the accelerators. And I remember, we knew guys at that stage and they would like buy a server. Literally, they'd have a server that cost them 15K in the back of the room and probably only using 10% of the capacity. But it was that era, right? And then we actually built it on AWS. We built far too much, but it cost us $100 a month. Right, and it would have scaled, not infinitely, but scaled a lot, right? And we were pitching to VCs at that stage. So very much when this was starting to emerge. Then I was at VMware for 8 years. Then I spent a couple of years at a fantastic company called Populo. My team, I think, deployed the first service in AWS at Populo. So 3 years ago, I joined AWS. Something, to be honest, I probably wanted for a long time because I was always aware of the potential of it, but didn't really have much of a presence in the market. So at AWS, I managed the travel tech, the security, and HR tech sectors.
So it's interesting, 10, 15 years ago, we were in the era of putting your servers in the back of your car and driving them to your hosting site. and now we're in a sort of different era. But the other thing that's interesting as well is that you talk about some of your customers in Ireland. Travelport's a customer. Like nobody using the EasyJet app sees AWS. You're not selling AWS to consumers. You're selling AWS to tech companies and startups.
Yeah, and there are so many different angles on it when you just see all the different ways in which AWS is used by different providers who are selling to the same airline. Yeah, it's been particularly interesting, actually, the travel vertical.
So we're talking today about the big idea, right? So maybe let's focus a little bit on AWS. How do you explain AWS to and clouds to maybe a not so tech audience?
So essentially, AWS enables IT to be delivered as a utility. So in the same way that you can switch a light on and off. So you pay for it when it's switched on, okay? Within that IT, there's compute, there's storage, there's networking, there's all these other bits that mean that it can scale up and down, that it costs less, so it reduces environmental impact. It's a utility, essentially.
Yeah, you're running a server, you could have a mobile app, you could have a website, it's talking to a server, but the server isn't a real physical server, it's virtualized and it's there when you need it, or as much of it is there when you need it.
Well, the capacity is there, but if you consider that example that I gave earlier, so for that guy who had that server in the back of his room, probably using 10% of it, and it would have stayed there, he would have kept using that server, probably underutilized to a point, and then he would have had to double the capacity, buy another server. So he got the hardware, the capital investment, right? As opposed to being able to scale up and down on demand. And then if you consider then something like Netflix, being able to deliver ultra high definition content to every house in every estate in Ireland, all these different device formats, to think about all the different layers of service, all the different bits of magic that have to happen within that. even if you're running it in the same room, you'd probably struggle to do some of that stuff. But the cloud enables services like Netflix.
So talking about the startups now, rather than buying a server and sticking it in their garage, they're starting on AWS. How does that help them innovate? Is it like you're going to see a completely different approach to building technology? They're obviously not worried about power supply, cooling, storage, capacity, redundancy, any of that stuff. They can focus on sort of building a great UX, building functionality, innovating their product.
Yeah, and I think infrastructure is part of the story.
Yeah.
So the other piece as well is software, approaches to software development. Yeah. That's been getting much better. All the frameworks that people are using, much more powerful. All the different elements that sit in between as well.
Yeah.
So you can build a lot of stuff quite quickly these days, much quicker than you could have. And all the concerns that you would have had previously, a lot of those have diminished. So now it's a product question.
Yeah.
Getting that intersection right, building, optimizing where the feature set are versus the problem that people have, how much they're willing to pay, are there enough of them, all that kind of stuff, right? You can build pretty much anything these days, and it's just a question of what you're building.
You're worried about product roadmap, your features, your backlog, and you're a lot less worried about the non-functional architectural piece because, basically AWS provides that.
Yeah, all that stuff is available. With a credit card, you have access to the same tools that everyone else has, and a lot of the complexity is diminishing, and that product question is more critical than ever. It's what you're building. But I'll give you an example. I mean, in this room actually tomorrow there's going to be a hackathon, and we got 60 separate companies coming in to generative AI, and they're all building minimum viable products. So just if you consider that, like that volume of people in one event here, and we've had loads of these, right? So it's just a lot of this stuff is much more approachable than it would have been, And
they're building brand new, generative AI-based solutions. And from a CPU capacity perspective, none of those will be small and simple from a capacity perspective, right? So you really need to you're going to have 60 new companies or 60 new ideas, any of which could become a startup in its own right.
Well, you consider the scale of what's running in the back end.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost them, I'm seeing customers spending tens of euros evaluating different use cases.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if it scales, it end up costing more. But all those barriers are gone. And what's more important now is the idea, the insights, to be able to, create something valuable.
So let's bring it to travel. I think everyone here works for a travel tech. What's interesting about AWS and cloud computing from a travel perspective or the travel community? Or you can talk about the travel community here in Ireland a bit if you want.
I'm going to quote one of my colleagues in the US. He said last week that Ireland is a centre of excellence for travel tech globally. It's not well known that this small island off the coast of Europe has such an impact actually in the industry. So it's something I think is really, really cool actually.
There's a long history in Ireland of travel tech, going back to when Aer Lingus started Cara Computing, when Western Digital based their first offices here. Aer Lingus was hosting multiple other airlines on their reservation system, which is still running today, as far as I know, Astral. And you've also got the whole aircraft leasing industry. That business model was essentially invented in Ireland. Ryanair, based in Ireland, obviously Europe's largest carrier in terms of passenger numbers, and I think number 5 or number 6 in the world in terms of passenger numbers. You've got Ryanair Labs as well, and then you've got a whole bunch of native grown industries, Cartrawler, Hostelworld, Datalex, OpenJaw, Retail in Motion, and then a lot of other sort of international investors, Travelport being one, ViaSat being another. Now I'm getting in trouble because I'm going to forget to name some companies, when I'm going through this list. But I do think Dublin and Ireland is kind of this nexus of travel tech.
I mean, what Ryanair are doing, I think they're featuring it at reInvent next month. So again, within the airline industry as well, Ireland, we're doing notable things.
I want to thank you very much, David, for hosting us today.
The Travel Massive Podcast. TravelMassive.com.